Hi friends, so far what we have been taking a look at is some statistical modeling and some machine learning, basic machine learning from supervised learning perspective, and we have built the model, we have learned to deploy it into Azure machine learning, and also we have built that and scored that on R. What do we mean by supervised learning is when we have a labeled data set. Let's say you want to build a model to be able to classify the fruits, and you want to classify between an apple, an orange, an apple and guava. So you have a bag full of all these three fruits, and based on their features, let's say their color, their weight, their look and certain other features, you build a model, you train that, you put it into production, and then you try for any new data or any new fruit coming in, you want to score and predict what that fruit is. So this is an example of a supervised learning model, because we essentially are trying to score based on the labeled data. We have built the model based on the labeled data, that is the three fruits that we talked about. But what if your data is not labeled and you want to understand the behavior or a pattern? Let's say you have certain customers and you want to understand their preferences of purchase habits, and based on their purchases you want to bucket them into three clusters, or you want to form three different rules of recommendations. Let's say that there are mid-salaried customers who kind of spend something in between 50 to 60, and then you have extremely high spending customers above 100 and those below 25. Because the purchasing habits are different, you would have different set of recommendations and you would want to cluster them out. So essentially we do not have a labeled data here, but we want to devise certain boundaries and we want to classify them into three different buckets. So let's take a look at some of the different techniques here on labeling of the data. So let's jump into some clustering. So we start with the very basic means of clustering, that is K-means of clustering. So what it essentially means, it's an iterative clustering algorithm which wants to find the local maxima in each of the iterations. So essentially, if we are talking about these five data points, and we want to cluster them up, what K-means needs is you need to understand and come up how many clusters you need. So let's say you pick a K value, you say of all these five data points you want to have two clusters, and based on those two clusters you want to make certain decisions on the data. So how do we do that? So it basically, what it does is it randomly assigns the clusters the data points into the number of K values. So essentially we have said we want two clusters, so it would randomly assign so let's say the machine has randomly picked three of them to be yellow and the other two to be white, and this is the first iteration. And from there what it does is it computes the cluster centroid, and based on that centroid it recalculates the data points which belong to the cluster. So from this data point it basically recalculates the data points on the basis of the centroid. Now what you see from here is that the new based on the centroid, the new cluster becomes a bit different. So once this is done, it reassigns the clusters based on the centroid, and then it recomputes, and when it ends, it just keeps on repeating the process, but when there is no further switching of data points between the clusters, it ends. So that's all is happening from the algorithm perspective. Now let's take a quick demo. What we have is a wine data set. So if the wine data set has this data, it basically has three wine types and the contents of different contents of the wine, basically in the ingredients of the wine, and their calculations of what is the magnitude of these ingredients into this which went into making that wine. So we have the data set, and based on that we want to let's say if we wouldn't know the wines, we want to cluster them up. So essentially, although we are kind of aware with this data that we have 3 different wines available, but let's say we were trying to be just playing blind here. So this command triggers the clustering, so it accepts all the attributes of the content apart from the wine val, which is actually the wine variety. It picks the rest of them, and then that's from 2 to 14, if you see 2 to 14, and then it picks up and defines the 3 clusters, and does a k-means clustering, picking the first 20 randomizations. So if we were to do this, and based on this we can actually check how efficient our clustering here is. With the k-means clustering, we can just compare the k-means cluster with the wine value, because we already are aware of the labeled data. Here we are just trying to understand that against the labeled data, although in real life scenario you wouldn't be able to compare this, because you wouldn't have the labeled data set. Essentially since it's a clustering algorithm, and you wouldn't have the labeled data. So as you can see, it's not too good. We can see it has done reasonably well for Peter Michael, and it has done for Calcida Creek. We have good kind of clustering, but for Evening Land, it's all over the place. So it hasn't kind of identified a lot of records. So yeah, we will have to evaluate some other algorithm for bettering the results in terms of clustering for this one. So apart from this, let's also try maybe the famous iris dataset, and see how well this goes with k-means. Well, for iris, again we have the 3 species and of iris flowers, which we are trying to cluster down, and based on their petal length and petal width, and what we get is reasonably good cluster for this piece of data. So what you see here is 4 and 5 is actually it's the petal length and petal width of the data, and we have done the clustering. So yeah, we will in the next segment we will look at the hierarchical clustering and see how that works, and if we get a better result with that. Let's hope that we do. Stay tuned for the next video. Thank you.